Today we're going to talk about 9.1. It's the first section of chapter 9. Hopefully it's something that's pretty familiar to you. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do a two-line graph system. Before we always just talked about the one line that went across, and if you remember on that one line, we're going to let this be 0, and then your positive numbers went this way, like 1, 2, 3, and then you went backwards from 0, and that's where your negative numbers were. So all we've been talking about before is just positives or negatives. There could be fractions, there could be decimals, they're just one way or the other. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put another line that goes right straight down the 0 line and make it a two-line system. Well, if you have a two-line system, it's kind of like a thermostat. So where would my positive numbers be? Well, wouldn't it make sense that my positive numbers would be going up? So if this is 0, then going up, you would have your positive numbers. And going down from 0 would be like your thermostats below 0. So here's -1, -2, -3, however many you need to go down. So a two-line number system is because things in this world aren't just one-dimensional, they're two-dimensionals. I don't just have height, I also have width. And so that's why we need to come up with a two-line system to be able to do things such as in the stock market, how's it going? If you're looking at the coronavirus, how's the number of people going? You see a little, one thing causes another thing, and so that's where our two-dimensionalness comes from. So this is used in a lot of different fields, and so it's very important that you have some basic understanding of this two-dimensional system. Now let's talk about some basic vocabulary. Each of these lines, we don't call them lines anymore, we call them axes. Okay? Axis is the Latin word for a line, and we come up with the word that tells me the across line and the up and down line. Only in Latin, the across line starts with the letter X, and so we call this axis the x-axis. The up and down line in Latin starts with a Y, and so that's why we call it the y-axis. So the x-axis means this line right here. The y-axis is the name for this line right here. Then in addition, we have this point right here in the middle where the two lines cross. And so that's where 0 is for both of the lines, and it has a special name of the origin. If you know anything about vocabulary, origin means the beginning. So every time you get ready to do graphing or working with a number ordered pair system, you quite often start at the origin because that's what the vocabulary word means. In addition, you'll notice that these two axes divide this into 4 areas. Everybody see that? 4 different areas? And these 4 distinct areas are called quad. That means 4. Rants means areas. So 4 areas are defined by these 4 areas. Now, the Latin gave us all of the vocabulary words for it. So when we number these systems, we don't use our numbers, we use the Latin numbers or the Roman numbers. But the graphing system was developed long before the Romans came along. It was actually developed by the Chinese. And so the way the Chinese numbered the quadrants is a little different. This is quadrant 1. The reason it's quadrant 1 is because that's where both positives are. And in most people's lives, we just talk about quadrant 1. We just talk about something causing another one. Okay? Quadrant 2, though, goes backwards. So here is quadrant 2, quadrant 3 is down here underneath it, and then quadrant 4 is over here on the negatives, but 4 in Roman numbers is IV. So if I have a point, let's say I've got a point right here, and I ask you what quadrant is that point in, well, it's in this quadrant, so it's in quadrant 1. If I have a point that's here, if I asked you what quadrant that point's in, you would say it's not in a quadrant, it's on an axis. In fact, it's on the negative y-axis. So in this section, you'll have things where they give you a point and they'll ask you what quadrant is it in, 1, 2, 3, or 4. Or they might ask you, which axis is it on? Is it on the x-axis, the positive side, or the negative side? Is it on the y-axis, the positive side, or the negative side? So that's just some vocabulary that you need to know to help you figure out and answer those questions. The next thing that we need to know is once we've got the system set up, then we can graph points, and so that's what we're going to be asked to do. In order to graph a point, you have to know two things. You have to know two directions, not just three. It's got to be 3 and 4. It's kind of like if you played Battleship when you were a little kid. You know, you got to have which way you're going here as well as which way you're going up or down. So you have to have something called an ordered pair. In Latin, that was called coordinates. So sometimes in your work, it'll say, give me the ordered pair. Sometimes it will say, give me the coordinates. Now, if I'm going to give you the ordered pair, the first thing you have to remember is you have to put a pair of parentheses around it. If you answer this question on your online assignment and you forget to put the parentheses, it will count it wrong. So please don't forget, you need the parentheses for an ordered pair. And in the ordered pair, you're going to give me two numbers. No point can just be numbered by one number. You have to have two numbers. The first number is going to be the across, or the X part. The second number is going to be your up or your down. Okay? Your across point first, and your up or down point goes second. Kind of alphabetical. Across comes before up and down. Okay? So remember that. Across goes first, up and down goes second. Okay? So there are two things they're going to ask you to do. The first thing would be, let me give you a point, and let me ask you to graph it. Okay? So if we drew our number line, on your online you'll have a little graph there. We know that we have to go across 5, and then we need to go down because it's -3. So we're going to start at the origin, go across 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we will go down 3, 1, 2, 3, and we would put our dot right there. In your online assignment, start right here at the graph. Use your little arrow buttons that you have. Go across, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then if you're going down, just go 1, 2, 3, and then you click on it to make your dot, and that's how you would graph a point, okay? Be very careful. The one that seems to bother people the most is if you have a 0 in your ordered pair. 0 is a perfectly good number. We've talked about that, so don't let that bother you. If I have 2, 0, that means to start at my origin, go across 2, and then don't go up any. So you wouldn't go up any, you would stop right there, okay? So make sure you know, if the 0 is second, that means you don't go up or down. If the 0 is first, that means you don't go across. So pay attention to where you're going, which direction, and if it's positive or 0, get there and put your dot. The second thing that they'll give you in this assignment is they will give you give you 2 points or 1 point that's already graphed, and they will ask you to now tell them what the ordered pair is. So it's just going backwards from this one. If I want to know where A is, I know I'm going to start at the origin, and I'm going to say, well, which way across did you go? Oh, well, I had to go backwards too. So my across is -2. Then once I got there, how much up or down did I go? Oh, I didn't need to go up or down. So that's why I put a 0. And then remember, because this is an ordered pair, that you must put a pair of parentheses with a comma in between the two numbers. If I'm looking for B, how far across did you go? Well, I went 1, 2. How far up did you go? I went up 1. And so its ordered pair is 2, 1. Now, it's called an ordered pair on purpose. It matters which one you put first. 2, 1 is not the same as 1, 2. 1, 2 means you go over 1 and up 2. So make sure that you have the ordered pair in the right order or you'll miss it. The third thing that they're going to ask you to do in section 9.1 is they're going to ask you, is a point on a line? They want you to prove to yourself that it's actually on a line. So I had a bunch of points, I drew a line in between them, and I want to know if this particular point is actually on that line. A point will always be described as your ordered pair. A line will always be described as an equation. And in the equation, notice that they're going to use x and y. Remember, we said that's what the name of the axes were, and so that's why they like to use those favorite letters when they do an equation. So if I want to prove whether or not this ordered pair is on this equation, all I'm going to do is to substitute the numbers for my letters and see if it mathematically works out. So I'm going to put the 2 in place of the x. So this would be 2 times 3 plus 4, and I'm going to put what I have here for y in place of y. Now we know that I have to put it in parentheses because I have to remember I'm multiplying. That's not going to be 23, it's going to be 2 times 3. And I want to know, is that going to give me 16? Well, 2 times 3 is 6, 4 times 3 is 12, 2 times 2 is 4, and 4 plus 12 is 16. So yes, it worked out mathematically, so this point is really on that line. Another example, if I have -1, 0, and I want to know if it's on negative x plus y equals -1. Remember that negative x means that you're taking -1 times whatever you replace for x. So in this case, I'm replacing that with a -1. Plus, well, there's nothing in front of y, so all I'm going to do is put what y is there. And I want to know, is that going to give me -1? Well, -1 times -1 is actually +1. And 1 plus 0, would that be equal to -1? No. So no, it is not on that line. So, in retrospect, let me tell you one more time. You're going to be graphing points, giving me ordered pairs from them, telling me what quadrants things are on, graphing points, and then proving whether or not a point is on a line by simply plugging it in and see if it works mathematically.